the Life Science Innovation Pipeline, reports from New York City Incubators and Accelerators. And that is being moderated by Alex Philippidis. He is a senior news editor of Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology News. So welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Nancy, very kindly for your introduction, and thanks to NYC Builds Bio Plus and the other organizers and sponsors of the 2020 Real Estate Development Symposium for inviting me to moderate this panel, the second panel under the heading of the Life Science Innovation Pipeline. This one, as Nancy mentioned, reports from New York City Incubators and Accelerators. I'm Alex Philippidis, Senior News Editor, Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology News, or GEN for short. And for years, the whole of New York City's life sciences cluster had been perceived as far less than the sum of its parts. This has changed, especially over the past 7 years, with New York City now anchoring a region that ranks third in GEN's annual ranking of top 10 US biopharma clusters. Today, we will discuss one of the key reasons for New York City's recent life sciences success, the ability to grow and develop startups created by entrepreneurs like those served by the incubators and accelerators led by our panelists. We will learn a lot about what your incubators and accelerators have been doing to help support entrepreneurs, catalyze innovations, and grow new life sciences businesses and jobs. For the next hour plus, we will be hearing from our panelists who will have much to share. They are Stephen Chambers, PhD, New York partner and managing director of IndieBio, New York. Deepak Hegde, director at Endless Frontier Labs, founded at NYU Stern School of Business. Nishta, managing director, First Republic Bank, and she'll talk about BioLabs at NYU. Eva Cramer, Vice President for Biotechnology and Scientific Affairs at SUNY Downstate Biotechnology Incubator. Diane Fabel, Director of Operations, Center for Biotechnology at Stonybrook University, part of SUNY. Alice Chen, PhD, a Vice President with Accelerator Life Sciences Partners. And Cynthia Cleto, Director, Outreach, Entrepreneurship and Special Programs, Mount Sinai Innovation Partners. I invite each of you to introduce yourselves and present your incubators and accelerators and how they have contributed to New York City's life science ecosystem. After all the presentations, I'll follow up with a presentation of my own, then ask the group some questions. We'll have a half-hour moderated roundtable discussion and Q&A from you, our audience, who are listening to the discussion. And I invite you to submit questions and comments using the chat feature of Zoom. And this promises to be a very enlightening hour and a half. So let's get started. First off, Stephen Chambers.
Hello, everybody, and very pleased to be here. I have put together 4 slides. I don't know if you can boot them up, and I'll take you through my 4 slides just as an introduction to IndieBio. IndieBio is part of a fund, SOSV. SOSV is sometimes called the VC Accelerator. And it has a global network of accelerators. They have the life science one is called IndieBio, and it's been running for 5 years in San Francisco, very successfully. The other accelerators that we have are in San Francisco, Shenzhen, China. That's a HAX one. That's a hardware one. We have a China accelerator and a MOX one, which is in Taipei and also in Shanghai. We have a food accelerator, FoodX, which is in New York City. We have blockchain, which is and a fintech one, which is in New York City. So we have these accelerators, and the fund basically uses the accelerator program as like a due diligence process to accelerate these companies that come into us. Anyway, the IndieBio one, as I said, has been running very successfully in San Francisco for the past 5 years, hugely successful. So successful that New York State kind of reached out to IndieBio and said, hey, we'd like an IndieBio in New York. So beginning of the year, we kicked off as an accelerator in New York. If we can just go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the kind of global family that we have of accelerators that I've just talked about. And as you can see, the life science ones, and we do, you know, we look at a very broad portfolio. Like our portfolio is, we say it's human and planetary health. So we look at everything from, pharmaceuticals, biologics, small molecules, right the way through med tech, ag tech, clean tech, even alternative protein sources and biomaterials. So we have a very broad portfolio of companies that we look at. We just move on to the next slide, please. And what we claim to do is like we transform scientists into entrepreneurs. So we take very early stage entrepreneurs and companies, and we basically turn them into entrepreneurs. The typical person that comes to us is a postdoc, someone that's been doing research and is passionate about something they've discovered or a particular line of research and thinks that there's a commercial opportunity there. They come and they convince us with their passion and research as well, and we make an investment in those companies. And the gentleman that you see on the right here is kind of one of our many success stories that we have, is Uma Vatera that started Memphis Meats, which is just this year, in the year of the pandemic, has raised 180 million. So I think they raised 160 actually early on this year, right in the middle of the pandemic, their Series B. So, this is the type of company and the type of individual that we take. He was a postdoctoral researcher, and we basically help them become entrepreneurs and live their dreams. We kind of flippantly say, like, we help entrepreneurs get funded, get smarter, get moving, and go faster. So that's the idea behind the accelerator. We just move on to the next slide. And so how do we do this? What's the process? So the accelerator process that we have is we take these companies for 4 months, and we basically put them through a very accelerated program involving, like, there's a huge education component to it. There's also a huge amount of mentoring that goes on. And we basically get them ready for other investors to see what we've seen in them. So the goal of the accelerator is to increase their investment readiness level to a level where we can get follow-on funding into these companies to help them scale and grow. And the process that we have, like, it has very dependent on networks of entrepreneurs and also mentors to help these companies. And I just want to move on to the next slide. Okay, so as I said, like, we started our first accelerator program right at the beginning of COVID. It was the beginning of March. I think we were 2 days into March, and we started our program with 9 companies that we've taken through our accelerator program. Obviously, we had to do it remotely in these times. We don't typically do that. Typically, we get the companies to co-locate with us. Previously, it's been in San Francisco. This time and going forward, it's going to be in New York City. We have 10,000 square foot at Rockefeller University. We have a lab space there and a meeting space where we can start nucleating activity. And what we have is, like, these 9 companies that went through our program, they are now in a state where we are starting to get them in front of investors. We had our demo day this week. I'm happy to say that we had a very successful demo day. We had over 2,000 people log on to our website and view the demo, the pitches that the companies had. Half of those 2,000 people that came on were investors. So, this is the point where we start, exposing these companies to the outside world and getting other people excited about what we saw in these companies. If we just move on to the next slide, I just want to sort of just give you some metrics around, what we do in terms of, what we're seeing. Like, the teams that we see, as I said, 90% of them are PhD students. Okay, so, like, this is deep tech that we're looking at. There's a serious amount of research that's gone into this. Our demo days are kind of, fairly famous in terms of getting kind of bums on seats and getting people in front of these companies. The thing I wanted to say also about these companies is that, like, this isn't a 4-month exercise that we have with these companies. Like, the relationship that we have with these companies, we follow on with investment. And the good news is that 80% of these companies are still thriving and still existing after the program. Okay, so Obviously, there's a certain amount of attrition that goes on. Companies that don't have a good business model aren't getting traction either with investors or in the technology. They fall by the wayside. But the good news is that 80% have, that's the survival rate that we have. And I think the other thing that's interesting is that the average raise for the successful companies coming out of IndieBio is 2.5 million. So the ones that are successful within the program, they go on to raise substantially more money. So not just the Memphis meets where they're raising 160 million in a Series B, but also companies that are less successful, but still they are raising money and getting other people to follow on with their investment and help them realize their dreams. Okay, so I'll just stop there so you have a quick idea of what IndieBio is all about. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. Before I move to our second speaker, I want to acknowledge another panelist, Samuel Saya, PhD. He's a co-founder of Harlem Biospace. And we'll be hearing from him in a few minutes. Right now, we'll listen to Deepak Hegde, director at Endless Frontier Labs, which was founded at NYU Stern School of Business, for his presentation. Right ahead.
Great. Thanks a lot, Nancy. And thank you, Stephen and Alex, for moderating the discussion as well. If we could please fire up my presentation here, that would be great. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Great. So let me actually start with an anecdote to highlight our mission at Endless Frontier Labs, and also what I think we need to build a robust life sciences ecosystem to seed and scale life sciences startups. The anecdote involves Robert Swanson, actually a New Yorker, and an MBA graduate from a business school in the Northeast. Robert Swanson himself did not have a deep scientific education, but was intellectually very curious and liked to be up on the latest scientific developments. In 1975, he took up a job at Kleiner Perkins, a VC company, but soon his position was eliminated. Swanson found himself unemployed. But Swanson was fascinated by the latest developments in recombinant DNA technology, and he decided to cold call scientists working on the technology with the hope that one of them would be interested in commercializing the technology. One of the scientists he contacted was Herbert Boyer, a pioneer of the DNA recombinant technology at that time at the University of California, San Francisco. Boyer expressed interest, but was hesitant to meet with Swanson at first. Boyer was an academic scientist and was not well versed on matters of business. But eventually he decided to invite Swanson to his lab. They had a 30-minute meeting, and the 30-minute meeting got extended, eventually became a 3-hour meeting, at the end of which Swanson had convinced Boyer to give up his job as tenured faculty at UCSF and found a company to commercialize recombinant DNA technology. Now, they still had this question of how they commercialized this very basic scientific idea. And Herbert Boyer recommended from his scientific perspective that they focus on producing human insulin. From a scientific standpoint, according to Boyer, insulin was very well characterized, and its structure had already been elucidated, so the scientific risk involved was relatively low. Swanson brought his business acumen to the table. He had widely toured around basically pig factories all across, pigsties and pig pens all across the United States. And he knew that at that time, human insulin, the substitute for it was pig insulin. And it took about 8,000 pounds of pancreatic glands from 23,000 pigs to make 1 pound of insulin. And pig insulin obviously also created some allergic reactions in humans. So he saw the market promise of targeting the production of synthetic human insulin, and scientific expertise here came together with business acumen, and eventually the two wrote up a business plan, went to Kleiner Perkins, next slide please, and formed the company Genentech. Okay, and Genentech, as many of you know, seeded the biotechnology revolution and was sold to Roche in 2009 for about $50 billion. In my view, this example illustrates all the things that you need in a great ecosystem to seed and scale up science-based companies. And next slide, please. Our mission at the Endless Frontier Labs is to exactly bring together these different elements. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs like Robert Swanson and companies and scientists like Herbert Boyer come together and form companies like Genentech, ideally here in the city. We think scientific founders need tremendous strategic guidance from business experts, other scientists in their areas, access to investors, and day-to-day business development support to scale their startups. In order to do this, we bring together some of the world's leading business experts, scientists, and MBAs at the Stern School of Business to mentor life sciences startups in a 9-month seed stage program for life sciences companies here, but also across the world. The program does not require any affiliation with NYU. We work with several partners, including with several of those here at the panel. And most importantly, and I need to emphasize this, we do not take any fee or equity from the startups. Unlike other programs, perhaps, we are completely committed to the mission of scaling the startups up, and we do not get on their cap tables. However, we provide unparalleled access to investors in a very competitive environment that also, we think, benefits startups tremendously. Some of our mentors are among the city's leaders in their own fields. One of our mentors, for example, is Sharon Mates. Some of you may be aware that Sharon not only founded, but is also the current chairman and CEO at Intracellular Therapies, which is a multi-billion-dollar publicly listed company here in New York, which recently got the first approval for adult schizophrenia this past December. She comes and spends 5 full days at our program each year to mentor our startups and spends even more time with the startups as well. We have Rana Al-Haq, who is a senior director and principal at Pfizer Ventures. We have Dick Foster, who started McKinsey's healthcare practice, come through as a mentor. We have Dan Littman, who is one of the world's leading immuno-oncologists. And this, for us, is the key benefit of a program that is seeded out of a university, which is we are able to access some of the world's brilliant scientific minds in order to spend serious time with the startups at a phase where there is tremendous depth of knowledge on the scientific side that is required to pivot these startups to their ideal business applications. We have Paul Horn, who led IBM research for 15 long years and spearheaded projects like Deep Blue, Blue Gene, and Watson as well. So this is the collection of experts that we bring to the table. We also have mentors from leading venture capital companies across the world. Google Ventures, Verily comes from San Francisco. We have NEA, we have Hearst Ventures, we have Polaris Partners. Senior level VCs from these companies come to us as mentors. And to just kind of cite some success stories, last year, one of our startups came from Jennifer Doudna's lab, all the way from UC Berkeley, came here, got access to our mentors, and are now opening up a very a seed round that is pretty large, that they're getting tremendous traction on, including from our own mentors. Another company came from the Broad Institute at MIT and Harvard. Strand Therapeutics is pioneering mRNA technology to basically reduce some of the side effects of cancer therapies. They raised a massively oversubscribed $6 million round with participation from our mentors. A New York success story, the company was considering multiple locations, including Tel Aviv and Boston. We worked with BioLabs here, and ImmuneAI company that went through our program successfully raised about an $18 million round. Likewise, C2I Genomics, a Cornell-based startup that is basically doing liquid biopsy diagnostics, raised a $12 million round through our program. The plural of anecdote, obviously, is data. In just the 2 years that we have been up and running, we have received about 1,000+ applications. And each year, to give you a sense, we only take 50 startups. 25 of these are placed in deep tech and 25 in life sciences. So the competition is intense. And of the startups we have taken, we have graduated only 45 because mentors only graduate those startups that they believe are making successful progress, in turn ensuring that their most valuable time is committed to the most promising companies. Of the 45 startups, can we go to the next slide, please? And the next slide. Sorry, and the next slide.
Mm.
And the next slide. This is one of the difficulties. Okay, so our companies of the 34 that were looking for funding, 100% of them have received funding to date for a total aggregate seed raise since starting the program, not previous to the program or after the program, of about $72 million. And again, this is without us taking any equity in these companies. And about 100 plus MBA students have been involved and have been successfully paired up and received job offers from many of the startups as well. And the few startups that were raising a larger round through a priced round already have equity value of about $170 million. So these are some of the data. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what we are doing here at the Endless Frontier Labs is inspired the mission set out in a 1945 document written by Vannevar Bush, which was called Science, the Endless Frontier. Here are some of my favorite words from Science, the Endless Frontier. These are the words that inspire us and believe that there is a larger mission here to be fulfilled that involves converting the amazing technologies and science that are coming out of the universities to help them become massively scalable companies through the expertise that is available at the university and through our connections here. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Deepak. And thanks for a very comprehensive look at EFL. I invite now Nishta Rayo, Managing Director of First Republic Bank, to talk about BioLabs at NYU.
Thanks very much. Thank you so much, Nancy, and your team for organizing this fantastic event that now is, a yearly calendar hold in our ecosystem. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Nishta Rao. I'm the Managing Director at First Republic Bank, where I'm responsible for the growth and expansion of the bank's life science vertical. So I'm very new here in my new position, barely 3 weeks old. But prior to that, I was the Managing Director at BioLabs at NYU Langone, and also headed the Princeton Innovation Center BioLabs. And those were real success stories where, we created the infrastructure for startups, entrepreneurs, founders to come in and really translate their technologies from a proof of concept stage to hopefully what would be a commercially viable product or therapy. Now, all of that didn't happen in BioLabs, but what we wanted to do was to really provide them the platform, the partnerships, the support, and really the connections to the ecosystem where it would de-risk what they're trying to do, because we all know life sciences is a long-term type of game. There's a ton of technologies that don't make it. And so we wanted to really try and increase that percentage by trying to save them time. Hopefully they didn't have to reinvent the wheel every single time they wanted to do something. And so that's basically what we did. And it's interesting, all of us here have been part of the New York or the greater New York life science ecosystem for a long time. And we've really seen the evolution, if you will. 10 or 15 years ago when I was at the bench, little did I even imagine that we would have this amazing infrastructure in place. And we're not there yet. It's still the story that we need to write, which is why having these sorts of discussions and panels is really important to connect everybody. But the idea that we've come so far is just, tremendous. And what we really need to understand is this needs to happen collectively, right? And this is the approach that we took at BioLabs. This is the approach that, I'm going to be taking at First Republic Bank. There isn't really innovation in one space that can catapult us to success. It has to be across the board. And so the one thing that, this really started out with was the innovation in space, where we really had to figure out how companies would spin out. Where would they go? It's great if you 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when spinning a company out wasn't that popular, where would you house this company? So I think that's where it started. And really the intersection of real estate, commercial real estate especially, and science is something that propelled this forward. And I always joke around, especially when I talk to real estate developers, that earlier, I would look at PubMed to see. PubMed is this, portal where you can go access scientific literature to see what the latest technologies were and what the science coming out was. Now, you can get a pretty good idea speaking with a real estate developer, trying to find space for the next great company as to what people are working on. So things have changed. And what I hope to do at First Republic, as well as what we did at BioLabs very successfully, really proud of the efforts at BioLabs at NYU Langone, where we started with a handful of companies. And 3 weeks ago, we were a little under 30 companies. And these companies are from all over the place, academia, founded by entrepreneurs, really getting to massive Series A. The two companies that Deepak just mentioned before, C2I, Immunai, those are BioLabs companies, and they've got tremendous support from the ecosystem like EFL. So it is going to continue to be this effort from all walks of this ecosystem, whether it's getting CROs in place, working with academic institutions, working with banks who can help them really with their non-banking needs and advise them and partner with them. So I think that is what really is the exciting part. We all still can write this story. I mean, we are writing the story, and it's exciting to see where this goes. I'll stop there, but it's I think life sciences right now is booming, and really we hope that boom continues.
Thanks, Nishta. And I agree about the evolution of New York City over these last few years. Bringing up Samuel Saya, PhD. He's co-founder, Harlem Biospace. There you go.
Can everyone see me and the slides?
Yes. Yes.
Is this okay, or do I have to do something to extend the screen or anything? I hope this is okay.
No, it looks good.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm glad to be on the panel and contribute here. I just have a few slides and talking about Harlem Biospace. So I'm a professor at Columbia and started Harlem Biospace. I think we're finishing our 7th year. And so we're entering our 8th year. Started with the mayor's office, really building a life science incubator in Manhattan. Big fan of Ava Cramer, who's gonna be talking in a second, the SUNY Downstate. We were trying to build an incubator in Manhattan as well. At that time, there weren't so much activity. And as we've seen, it's really grown. And Nature ranked life science productivity. It's been talked about by a few panelists already in New York City. This is academic output. New York is actually #1 in the world, believe it or not. People would not have known that. But how to convert this academic output into a thriving life science industry, we're in the midst of that. And I think it's gonna do really well. I will plug our area a little bit in the rest of this in the next couple of minutes. And there's a lot of great real estate space as well as programs that are now taking place in New York City. But what I would like to point out, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm around this neighborhood at Columbia, is that in New York City, we do have an opportunity to build a cluster that might be anchored in West Harlem. Not to say that these other spaces and other locations won't be important, but I think if you look at Boston and San Francisco, you'll see that these great life science clusters is more than just, you know, it's really a cluster of a big university along with a group of buildings that would suit companies at all levels, from the startup to the big commercial efforts. And I would argue that West Harlem presents an opportunity in New York City, which was traditionally maybe not the case, but it's changed a lot. There's a multi-billion-dollar expansion by Columbia. So there's the Manhattanville campus, which is the main campus at Columbia. Columbia is the biggest university in New York City. You may or may not know about this multi-billion-dollar campus happening in Manhattanville. Renzo Piano's the master architect. It's my virtual screen behind me as well. The huge brain building and other sciences will be taking place there. The business school is moving there. And they're both within walking distance of what is called the factory district. Harlem Biospace has been in this factory district. CUNY is also close by. And Harlem Biospace caters to the very beginning startups. And we are still full. We have over 20 companies right now in our space. The Tasty building is 350,000 square feet of grade A lab space. It's lab space that will be open Q1, Q2 of next year. It would have been open already if it wasn't for the pandemic. So really, I think for the first time, there's commercial lab space around our whole area, right next to two very important Columbia campuses, as well as City College. So I'll probably just, end there. This is Harlem Biospace. We've been around for a while. That's a picture of our space. And we're actually, I think, remain the most affordable, certainly in Manhattan, even despite our very central location and very accessible location. That's why I think we continue to be full. But we also have common equipment and things like that. So it's really an exciting area that I would like everyone to know about, both because of the academic connections, which is I think unparalleled. They're within a 5-minute walk of three very significant academic campuses and a lot of lab space opening up in a pretty affordable way, from startups to big companies. And Columbia itself has a great entrepreneurship system, which I don't have time to get into, but just looking at all of this stuff geographically. And there have been some discussions about startups that have been taking place. This is Columbia statistics, about $60 billion raised by Columbia alumni. And so there's a very active group here, not only with science, engineering, business school, and really it's a great community that's being built here. Hopefully it'll be a great cluster to add to all this other great stuff happening in New York. Thanks.
Yeah, those were great slides. If you could share those with Samantha so we can get them put up on the SpotMe platform and everyone can see them, that would be great.
Great, thank you.
Very good. And thanks, Samuel. And we move on to Eva Cramer, Vice President for Biotechnology and Scientific Affairs at SUNY Downstate Biotechnology Incubator. Oh, hold on, Eva, you need to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to see you, Sam. So Sam used to be at our incubator in his younger days, I guess. Anyway, can we have the slides, please? Okay, so my name is Eva Cramer, and I'm president of the Downstate Biotech Incubator, Tech at 710, and BioLabs. Next slide, please. Basically, I want to tell you that biotech is really growing in Brooklyn. So we have 3 locations. On the left side of the screen, you see the Downstate Biotech Incubator. It's meant for early stage biotech or tech companies. It's 50,000 square feet and has modular lab and office space, has core facilities and conference space. And it has a nursery program for smaller companies where companies can share space. But our companies are growing so rapidly that some of our companies have even built out GMP space within the incubator. Just next door to the incubator is Tech at 710. This is a fantastic specialized chemistry space. It's about 13,000 square feet. You can see this is XL batteries in their space, and you can see we have 26 fume hoods. And so the space is divided into lab and office space. There's also a biological space. So when companies outgrow the incubator or Tech at 710, they can move to BioBat at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. And the picture on the right shows the Brooklyn Army Terminal. It's 97 acres of land on the Brooklyn waterfront. And BioBat is in Building A, which is the building next to the water. That building alone is 2 million square feet. It's fantastic space, and it's meant for biotech and tech companies that now have outgrown the incubators. They want to continue doing research, but they also want to begin to manufacture. And so we have about 200,000 square feet in Building A, and we're building that out in phases. So phase 1, it was 38,000 square feet. And one of our first companies, the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, which is actually still at the incubator, but needed to expand, moved to BioBat. And together, they have this 38,000 square feet, and we have about 5 other little companies with them in that space. We have built out phase 2, which is 85,000 square feet. And that houses companies that are still doing research, but have also started to do manufacturing. And 2 of those companies have built either completed their own GMP space or are in the process of doing so. This is a joint venture between Downstate and the New York City EDC. And it's very easy to get to this space by either the New York City ferry system. So the ferry comes into a dock that's at BioBat. You can come by subway or you can come by car. And one of the wonderful things, there's free parking. Actually, at all 3 sites, there is parking. All 3 sites are part of Startup New York, which I'm not sure everybody is familiar with. It's a terrific program that has been done by Empire State, and it enables companies to be in a tax-free zone. So that means that the companies themselves, for instance, don't pay sales tax, and their employees don't pay state and city taxes. All 3 sites have access to university resources. That means they can work with our scientists, clinicians, or students. So for example, 3 of our PhD students got their degree working with IAVI, the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, in vaccine development. All companies have access to our medical and scientific library. One of the most important things that the companies really love is access to our world-class vivarium. And so we have everything from mice to non-human primates. The companies also have access to our research facilities and can use specialized equipment. And they can work with our clinicians on clinical trials. So for example, 13 of our companies pivoted to COVID-19 and are able to work with our patients and clinicians at Downstate. We have a wonderful entrepreneurship program run by Mary Howard called the Next Milestone Program. It helps mentor our companies. It sets up seminars and it has networking sessions. In addition, we have entrepreneurship programs. Our students have formed entrepreneurship programs and are very anxious, our medical students and PhD students, very anxious to work with the companies. And as I mentioned, all 3 sites are easy access from companies from anywhere in the New York area. If I have the last slide, please. So this just gives you an example of the success of our companies. We're very, very proud of them. This just represents 1 year between the beginning of April 2019 to the end of March in 2020. At that time, we had 38 companies. They had jobs for 238 people. They, just in 1 year, increased their revenue by over $5 million and brought in federal and non-federal funds of over $329 million. In addition, our companies have received or filed for 22 patents. So as you can see, I'm very proud of our companies. They do extremely well. They come from all over the city. And one of the new things that we're really seeing, and they come from the eLab program, and they come also from overseas. We're seeing a lot of companies now coming to us from abroad. So thank you. And I'm open to questions. I'm sure that'll be later on. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much. I'm sorry. Okay. Thanks so much, Eva, for a very good look at the success at SUNY Downstate over the years. I remind our audience that you can submit questions in our Q&A. Later on, we'll get to some. And I bring up Diane Fabel, Director of Operations at the Center of Biotechnology, Stonybrook University, part of SUNY. Hey, Diane.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate the introduction. Could we bring up the slides, please? Great, so thank you very much. As was said, I represent the Center for Biotechnology. I'm Director of Operations and Strategy for the center. We are housed at Stonybrook University, but we have a statewide mission, and that mission is to increase the yield, accelerate the development, and improve the success rate of emerging life science technologies and companies statewide. Next slide. So we have several major designations. Our longest standing is with New York State. We are a New York State Center for Advanced Technology with a focus in medical biotechnology, and we've been had that designation since 1983. And it's just been a tremendous support because it allows us to build a platform. That designation helped us secure designation as an NIH Research Evaluation and Commercialization Hub in 2015. We were one of 3 in the country that received that designation. That's now been expanded to about 8 different university clusters. You can think of that as a proof of concept center. It was the basis for the formation of the Long Island Bioscience Hub, which is a collaboration between Stonybrook University, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, Brookhaven National Laboratory, and the Feinstein Institute at Northwell Health. And it's focused on trying to translate the innovations emerging from those institutions into real commercial opportunities. We are supported by the Economic Development Administration to provide mentorship and SBIR, STTR training across Long Island. And we also have a federal designation as a BARDA Drive Accelerator. BARDA is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, and they are really the tip of the spear in the addressing any threat to national health security, but in particular right now, COVID-19. And it's our job to help them scout the New York, Long Island, Northeast regions for innovation and companies that are working in areas relevant to their interests. And you can see our focus areas really, it's technology development toward commercial goals, company startups, forging strategic partnerships. We have a really great network of relationships, capital formation, and then mentorship, diversity, and inclusion. We're very involved in education and making sure that we are training a diverse workforce going forward. Next slide, please. So I just tried to show our programming kind of as a continuum, even though it doesn't always operate quite that way. So we have this suite of end-to-end kind of programs and support services that really help move a technology from point of disclosure all the way through to securing professional financing. I put Series A financing here, but sometimes it's more of a strategic partnership or other kind of exit for the company or expansion for the company on the early stage. And we have a fund that invests in commercially promising faculty research across our 4 partner institutions. Right now, I'm just talking about the NIH portion of our mission. And so we'll support feasibility projects or proof of concept funding. And then they enter into our technology development and business development infrastructure. Next slide, please. So I mentioned this NIH REACH hub designation. It's really important because it connects us to a network of more than 30 other academic institutions developing best practices for pipeline development. And it's tied to several federal agencies that are extremely helpful in guiding us and helping us make determinations in where we invest our funds. So certainly the NIH, but the USPTO, the FDA, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and Kaiser Permanente all weigh in when we have projects that we want to invest in to give us their perspective. And we're also aided in that perspective by a tremendous external review board who really helps us prioritize where to place our investments. Next slide. So I just took a snapshot. This pilot program started in January. The first investment was made in January 2016. Since then, we've reviewed 187 different proposals. We have funded 58 of them. We invested about $4 million, just shy of $4 million. And that has leveraged $31.4 million in the 3 years we've been operating that. And to the right, you can see these are some of the companies that have come out of our efforts. So Cramer, which is a great example, I think, of what's possible. We took from point of disclosure, we invested 50,000 in the first round, 100,000 in the second round. And by the fall of 2019, the company was able to raise a $10 million Series A. And the other companies have different backgrounds. Some are largely funded through federal awards, like MicroRid secured a $4 million DoD grant with our support. Others have SBIR, STTR funding, but significant amounts, $4 million, et cetera. So next slide, please. One of the things, and I would love to talk to the group about this, one of the things that we struggle with here out on the island, even though we're only like 40 miles from Manhattan proper, is we don't have a huge pool of serial entrepreneurs. We have lots of first-time entrepreneurs. And I would also say that I think that was true in Manhattan until just recently too. I've been doing this quite a while, and it's amazing how long it really took for things to take hold in New York. And of course now they are, and it's great to see. But there was a time when it was really hard to try to get some of these things going. So we actually started a Bio-Entrepreneur in Residence initiative where we provide milestone-based compensation to select serial entrepreneurs who are interested in looking at the IP portfolios across our 4 partner institutions with the sole purpose of looking to launch a company. And like I said, we offer modest milestone-based compensation and also serve as a startup team for that company. So far, we've recruited, I think it's 11 entrepreneurs, and we've started 12 companies. And they have raised, they're still early, $15 million, between $15 and $20 million so far. Next slide, please. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Oh, sorry, there it was. I'm sorry. Could you go back? So in terms of the services that we provide to companies that are in our pipeline or technologies that are in our pipeline, innovators, we host these biostrategy sessions. So first we work with the company internally and get them kind of ready for their first public presentation, a real one. We assemble a group of advisors for them to present to, and they do a 30-minute pitch, and then the next 90 minutes is an interactive Q&A where they get a lot of feedback and actionable guidance. It's usually the first time the company has been in front of investors and strategic partners, and it's meant to be a friendly, supportive environment. Very often there are weaknesses in the strategy identified. Really, that's the point of doing it. And we will take the project in-house and help the company understand a little bit more about their competitive landscape, the regulatory pathway, IP strategy, whatever the issue happens to be. And we have tremendous support for this from our partners, and I've just listed a few of them there. Next slide. Once they go through this process of identifying where the weaknesses are, and they kind of come up with an action plan, we build a team of mentors around the entrepreneur if they want that. And that team of entrepreneurs and mentors is meant to help them execute on that strategy, to help them truly take steps forward to execute on the strategy and pivot as needed, but really to make progress rather than we work with a lot of academic innovators, and they can get kind of stuck on the science, and this really helps them focus on moving the business objectives forward. Next slide. I mentioned we are supported by the EDA. That's for SBIR, STTR workshops and providing one-on-one iterative grant writing services. And that's been really successful. Our success rate has been as high as 50%. We also received a designation from New York State to be a downstate SBIR, STTR training hub. Next slide. I mentioned BARDA Drive. Again, this is just to let the audience know that if they have technologies relevant either to the COVID-19 response or to some of the other areas that BARDA is interested in, and you can think of anything that threatens health security, please get in touch. We'd be happy to talk to you about what their current interests are and how we can help facilitate your access to the decision-making team at BARDA Drive. Next slide. We also focus very much on workforce development, graduate student education. We offer an 86-hour training program, which is now going to be the basis for an advanced graduate certificate in innovation and entrepreneurship. But those students go through a curriculum fully taught by industry veterans, and they're given real intellectual property to work with in teams to develop real commercialization strategies. And so it's IP, it's the competitive landscape, it's all those things with all the hairballs that really IP typically comes with. It's never perfect. So they get the experience of doing that, and then they present to our investors and advisors. We've had more than 500 graduate students and postdocs go through that program, and they've achieved a significant level of success now in their own careers, and they're coming back to teach. So it's great. Next slide, please. And I'll just mention we are hosting the Life Sciences Summit November 17th and 18th. If anybody's interested, let me know. New York City Builds Bio is one of our supporters. We're very grateful for that. And I think that's it. Next slide. Just This slide is just to show you a list of our clients. And, just to give you a sense for critical mass, they span from Long Island, most of them through Downstate. We have some in Buffalo, but it's a pretty robust group. We have 2 incubators on Long Island that I should mention. We were the founders of the Long Island High Tech Incubator, or one of the founders, and the other is managed by Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, the Broad Hollow Bioscience Park. Next slide. So all of this activity over the last 15 years has generated $1.2 billion in economic impact. And that is documented actually by CEOs who actually have to every year document the role we played in generating these impacts. Next slide. And that's it. I want to thank New York City Builds Bio and answer any questions anyone has at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. And I'll bring up Alice Chen, PhD. She is a vice president with Accelerator Life Sciences Partners. Go ahead.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. So thank you very much, Alex, for moderating, and thank you, Nancy and team for the event. It's great to be here, and hopefully everybody is doing well under the circumstances. I'm Alice Chen. I'm the vice president at Accelerator Life Science Partners, and here at Accelerator, we're a venture investment and company creation vehicle for early stage life science technologies. We started in Seattle in early 2000, so about 2 decades ago, and established our operation in New York City back in 2014 in the Alexandria Center for Life Sciences, precisely because of the tremendous research output previous panelist mentioned. So we have since added a 3rd location in San Diego. So we're primarily in the therapeutic space with companion diagnostics, and we're going into AI machine learning enabled drug discovery as well. I'll keep the presentation short, and I look forward to the Q&A. So Alex, we can go to the next slide, or perhaps Nancy. Thank you. So here is a quick summary of the resources that we provide our portfolio companies. As I mentioned, we're in the space of high quality, cutting edge life sciences, and we provide capital, management team, scientific expertise, and also facilities. Now I'll go into each of them a little bit. On the venture capital side, we have a pre-baked syndicate of top tier venture capitalists and also corporate ventures. So for ALSP1, we have Eli Lilly, Johnson Johnson, Pfizer, AbbVie Ventures, as well as Arch, ARE, Alexandria Real Estate, and among others. In New York, we actually have partnership for New York City as our investor as well. On the management team and scientific expertise side, because a lot of our companies actually come straight out of research and research institutions and universities. So we, as Accelerator, we provide the drug development expertise, strategic planning, IP path forward, among other resources that would make our portfolio companies successful. As we call it, it's from making coffee to making deals is what we do. And on the facility side, as I mentioned, we established our operations in the Alexandria Center for Life Science, and we also have facilities in the other locations that I mentioned before. And to provide some examples, in New York, we have created Petra Pharma with Dr. Lou Cantley at Weill Cornell, Loto Therapeutics with Dr. Sean Brady at Rockefeller. We also have projects from Columbia and other New York institutions, as well as institutions from across the US, such as MD Anderson Cancer Center and such. In terms of progress, very briefly, Loto Therapeutics, for example, has formed a $1 billion strategic collaboration with Genentech back in 2018. And we're also happy to report that Petra Pharma was also purchased by an undisclosed acquirer in May this year, despite the pandemic. So we're very happy that these companies, which we created from the ground up, we're very happy to see their continued success. If we go to the next slide, thank you. So this is a quick overview of how we create companies. Essentially, we start with search and evaluation of interesting technologies, and the parameters that we look for are differentiation, robust validation, development feasibility, strategic fit, IP protectability, and such. And of course, the team weights tremendously in our evaluation systems. In terms of sources, we source our technologies through referrals of our tech transfer colleagues and also incubator colleagues, some of which are on this panel. Very nice to see you again. And also through our investors, advisors, entrepreneur networks, and including our academic founders. In terms of the type of technologies, as I mentioned, we're mostly in therapeutics, some companion diagnostics, and going into AI machine learning, enabled drug discovery. We're also, we have created companies in oncology, immunology, neurosciences, infectious diseases, regenerative medicine, among other indications. So fairly broad, and just a tiny little pitch, we're always looking for exciting technologies. So please feel free to reach out. Given the time, I will pause here for now, and I look forward to the Q&A session. So Alex, back to you.
All righty, thanks, Alice. And I'll move along to Cynthia Cleto. She's Director of Outreach, Entrepreneurship, and Special Programs at Mount Sinai Innovation Partners, which facilitates real-world application and commercialization of Mount Sinai health system discoveries and development research partnerships. Cynthia?
Hey, everybody. I'm going to be a little different. I will be slide free since, it's the age of Zoom and we're probably all zoomed out. The first question I'll ask is, can you hear me fine? Clearly you can because you're smiling. Great. Yes. Okay, great. So maybe I can talk a little bit about Mount Sinai Innovation Partners, and I'll start with our mission. What we care about is to positively impact patient lives. That's our full mission. So anything that we do with company formation, we need technologies that will do that for our patients and our system. So what we focus on really is patient-centric innovation. And lately, we've done quite a bit of resilient innovation because we launched a handful of companies even during COVID. And one of the examples I wanted to share with you today, I'm very proud of this because Kantaro Biosciences, look it up. It's the it's the company that will release the commercial version of the Mount Sinai antibody test. It has been given CE mark approval. Therefore, it will be available in Europe already, even before the US. So hopefully the FDA will approve that shortly as well. So we look at that and we say, that is resilient innovation. And that's what we want to do because our focus is patients and critical unmet healthcare needs. So that's really our goal. So Mount Sinai Innovation Partners is a pillar of the Mount Sinai Innovation ecosystem. And I like to think of us as a BioLabs for healthcare. We have about 200 patents per year, which is huge. And our innovators, or I call them intrapreneurs because not all of them end up creating companies, but they end up creating technology that save lives. So we have seasoned PIs, seasoned researchers. We have young scientists, students, staff, nurses, right? All innovating. And that's the kind of culture that we try to create. It's also interesting because our culture both has academic and clinical settings all in one. Therefore, as you release technology, you can validate it within the clinical setting. An example of that, another example that I'll talk about is Spravato, which is now being marketed and distributed by Janssen. That technology was created by Dennis Charney, the dean of our medical school. That technology is a nasal spray for treatment-resistant depression, because his area of expertise is resilience. And so that Dennis Charney also holds about 20 patents worldwide. So that's the kind of innovators we have. That's the kind of leadership we have. And esketamine, I believe, Spravato from Janssen got FDA approval in August, and phase 3 data show that it can decrease depression symptoms within 24 hours. So that's quite amazing. So that's another example. So I'll pepper kind of my talk with a little bit of these life-saving technologies, right? So Mount Sinai Innovation Partners is front and center in this ecosystem. We are a full service commercialization group. We treat the process as a pipeline. So we have right from the beginning, the inception of the research with world-class clinicians and researchers, all the way to commercialization. We evaluate the technology, we do due diligence and competitive intelligence on what else is out there. And so that's why I'm saying we're full service. We will translate this into a spin out or a startup if we feel that that is how it's most effectively going to be translated to the patients. Or we can license the technology to, Janssen, right? Kantaro is an example of us thinking, oh my, we have an antibody test that we created all the way back in March. We would like to spin out a company. We formed it after just a few months of the invention. So we formed that company in May, and now we got EU approval just several months right after. So that's how quick we want to do things, especially in this day and age when we're trying to help the world heal from COVID, right? So our team is a team of 50. We have business, science, and law professionals. And we also have entrepreneurs in residence. These are seasoned executives that have started numerous companies with multiple exits. We also have a network of 300 plus active partnerships, and that means, active licenses and agreements with corporate entities, financial groups, government entities, and foundations. So that's actually also very important for the New York life science ecosystem, is the network of support groups around it and how connected we all are. Finally, I'd like to mention that since we are a health system, our technology span the gamut all the way from drugs, devices, digital health, diagnostics, as well as even things like reagents, like cell lines, right? So these are all very, very interesting innovations that I'm seeing happening around me all the time, and I'm constantly stimulated. So I'll give you another example of something that we did a few years ago, which went public on the AIM quite fast, and then is now on the NASDAQ. Renalytics AI is a startup that utilizes AI in order to risk stratify those that will fall into renal failure. We want to catch them before they fall into renal failure and help them. And so that company was formed from Mount Sinai Technology, from our chair of medicine, Dr. Barbara Murphy. It was formed in July 2018, went public on the AIM stock exchange on November 2018, and now went public on NASDAQ just this July in 2020 with a market cap of 435 million, almost $500 million. So this is the kind of innovation that we're pushing. They are located in JLabs and as well as in Midtown. Okay. The startups and entrepreneurs that we work with, they're both internal and external. So internal are those heavy hitters like Dean Charney, the PIs, the nurses. So everybody internal to Mount Sinai, working in the research lab or the clinic. We spin out the tech from Mount Sinai for those internal ones. And we also could create a company if that's what we deem is necessary. But we can also collaborate or fund external companies. We have an organization called Mount Sinai Ambulatory Ventures, and they fund external companies that have a synergistic mission with Mount Sinai. An example of that is Gauss is an example, which is an AI-enabled real-time blood loss monitoring system. And that kind of system is right now in our maternal wards, and it decreases the mortality, maternal mortality, and increases us catching it before it becomes a hemorrhage or a very bad hemorrhage, like 30% of the time. So it's increased that monitoring really well. So we do work with external companies and we fund them if they have a synergistic vision. We also have a diversity and innovation hub that is coming from our Office of Diversity and Innovation, wherein they can work and support with minority and women entrepreneurs within the system, external to the system, close to Mount Sinai, like in East Harlem. So these are community members. So we also do that. Other programs that I'd like to mention, we have an I3 accelerator. That is a $10 million fund that looks at early stage technologies and pushes them through until they reach inflection points and become commercially viable. So that's another program. My team does a lot of commercialization and entrepreneurship education, and that includes I-Core methodology that is applied to healthcare, as well as lean launchpad methodologies. All right, let me see if there's anything else that I'm missing. Oh, another company that that we launched recently is Trellis. So that is a resilience-driven holistic care approach for chronic diseases such as IBD. It's starting with IBD, and that was invented, the method was invented by Dr. Marla Dubinsky and Lori Kiefer, because we found that people with IBD, irritable bowel disease, there's quite a bit of psychological toll that it takes on them. And so giving a resilience-driven training program and platform increases good outcomes for these patients. And that was also launched just recently. They have a seed of 5 million. And so they're working on obviously getting more funding, okay? And just to end, I would like to just mention, I think what's next for the New York City ecosystem, you know, space is one thing. And I know that's why New York Builds Bio is here and our friends in real estate are here. It takes a village. So space is one thing that we need. However, we also need a holistic and integrated support network within the ecosystem. That means that within New York, we need mentors, we need science, business, and tech experts. We need C-suite leadership that can take the helm from these organizations and help them through, and also easy access to finance. So it's not just the space, I would say. I think it's the collaboration between all of those facets that make New York City great. We have all of these. We just need to connect the dots. That's it from me. So looking forward to discussing with all of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cynthia, and thanks to everyone for sharing your presentations and your knowledge with all of us. And I do have a presentation.
Oh, and one last thing that I'll share.
Sure.
I'm sorry,
right.
Alex.
No problem.
I forgot to share, which I'm very proud of, Nishta. is actually a graduate of our fellows program from 4 or 5 years ago. So we're very proud of what she's accomplished. This is the impact of the program as well. And Nishta, you know, whenever she comes and talks to our fellows, it's like, you know, Dave Chappelle talking to the high school students in Duke Ellington High School. So it's a great homecoming. So we're also very proud of that.
Great, thanks. Now, while I have a presentation, I know our time is limited, so I'm just going to share a few of the slides in that presentation. There we go. And if we can skip to slide 3 on that, and I'll start with there. That's a little bit about Jen. There we go. New York City anchors a region where, yeah, there we go, where life sciences activity has accelerated over the past 7 years, taking it from 5th, the first year we did Jen's top 10 US biopharma clusters, to 3rd, the last time we updated it last year, and we are preparing a new version that's going to come out in coming days. Next slide, please. Jen ranks regions on 5 criteria: NIH funding, venture capital funding, patents, lab space, and jobs. Next slide, please. In New York City over the past decade, stakeholders have finally put together the pieces of a growing life sciences cluster. And from the universities and other research institutions, as seen in increasing NIH funding and patent numbers, to investors, as seen in our venture capital numbers over the last couple of years, to the state and city governments that have fueled expanded activity with more than $1 billion in incentives, to real estate developers, which have flocked in recent years toward building more life sci projects, enabling more jobs for the sector. Next slide, please. And I don't know. For NIH funding in the federal fiscal year that just ended September 30th, New York City, as in congressional districts 5 to 16, won more than $236.5 million in 350 awards. That's up 55% from 2013, when we had $152 million and 321 awards. Next slide, please. The number of cumulative number of biotechnology patents awarded since 1976 has more than quadrupled between 2013 and this year, from 705 to more than 3,000 patents. And I'll hold it right there because I want to get to a couple of questions to our panelists. I'd be happy to forward my entire presentation to anyone watching who wants to see it in its entirety. So I guess the first question I want to ask to as many of you, the panelists, as want to jump in, is if you could offer some detail on the types of life science companies that are coming to you. What specific technologies or tools or devices do you look at? Are these, are you seeing more in healthcare AI or tools and tech or drug and vaccine, especially in light of COVID-19?
I'm willing to say, you know, our companies have pivoted, 13 of them pivoted into COVID-19 related activities, into therapeutics, vaccines, diagnostics. But our companies we have new materials, regenerative medicine, you know, basic, very broad types of companies, not just one type of company.
I'm happy to jump in here as well.
Sure.
Because we get about 600 applications every year, we can systematically look at different trends. And, you know, relative to last year, it seems like we are seeing a smaller fraction of immuno-oncology. Immuno-oncology companies were hot. And now the action seems to have shifted to mental health and computational sort of biology-driven companies. That seems to be where we are seeing a huge spurt in applications.
So I'll just add very quickly to that. We're seeing a definite trend towards convergence of technology. So you have the tech aspect along with the traditional molecular biology, immuno-oncology types of companies. Even gene therapy now, they have the algorithm-based aspect where you're trying to find the right capsid or the right delivery mechanism. So there is that convergence. I also think in New York, we are a little bit more open-minded to different types of technologies. So you are seeing folks in the food science come in, things that have a definite impact on the consumer. So we're seeing that happen as well. A lot of neuro, the drug-resistant depression type of technologies. One thing that is interesting is that there are companies that have multiple locations. So you have European companies that are coming into the US, particularly the Northeast. New York is a hub because it's close to Wall Street money is accessible. Boston is another hub, but these are definite trends that we are seeing, which I think is very exciting for us, and it also begs the question as to what's next. We have covered now the initial 2 to 3 years as we all are here in the incubator capacity, but now we're seeing companies that are thinking of, okay, where do you go from here? Which I think is going to be important.
Okay. And anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I echo the rise of COVID-19 focused technology, as well as resilience-driven technology. So it's sort of addressing like mental health and what we're dealing with that also has to do with COVID-19, but also just in general, I thought that digital health was already quite widespread, but wow, like it just even more exploded, which is amazing. Faster times to market is what that means for those kinds of technology. So it's been an interesting ride.
And maybe you want to talk a little bit about engineering biology, or what some call synthetic biology, because I know SOSV has invested a lot in those kinds of startups. And, New York seems to be a prime place for that kind of technology to emerge, kind of the consumer biology type of thing, like your Memphis meats.
Yeah, so we are seeing a lot of that. That is kind of like a very hot area that we see an awful lot of activity there. So for those of you that don't know, this is the cultured protein side of things, where basically they're producing protein without the cow or without the chicken. So this is all done in a fermenter or in a reactor, producing vegan kind of protein. And this is like a huge area of interest, both investor interest, but also companies. Basically it's derived from stem cells. So basically they're taking a cow stem cell or a chicken stem cell and basically kind of like growing it up. And it's like I've tasted it as well, and it's pretty good. So it's a very interesting area. I just want to touch on the engineering biology to pick up that theme, is that, we do see an awful lot of that. Synthetic biology, it's more accurately called engineering biology, where they're engineering biology to make certain things, a lot of biomaterials. So we see an awful lot of biomaterials. Again, like there's a sustainability side of things here, where that the way that we're producing, whether it's meat from cows or soya or whatever, like it's just not sustainable. And so there's other methods of being able to produce these materials from microorganisms that we see an awful lot of. And again, there's an awful lot of interest from large corporates coming into this area as well, as they're looking for a more sustainable kind of profile. So we see an awful lot of activity around this And I think that's probably going to be a very big thing in New York. It's probably going to be, you know, the next generation of manufacturing that we see in New York. So I'd look out for that, that sector to sort of really blossom over the next couple of years.
Well, when we think about organizing for the Endless Frontier Act, that definitely has to be a major focus of how we do that, both with organizations that are nurturing companies in that field, but also corporate entities that want to invest in new approaches in that area, and also new kinds of facilities that will facilitate that research and the manufacturing that you're talking about.
Yeah, so, we're also seeing it. We have two companies, Fork and Good, that makes food, and also Alginet, which makes clothes, from algae, and spun off from BioLabs was Modern Meadow, which, makes leather, synthetic leather.
Right.
So if I may throw a quick question out there, and kudos to all of you for being the harbingers of creating and furthering the development of all these incredible companies. How do we, as an industry, keep these emerging businesses from leaving New York? You're all doing a terrific job of generating them. They're getting launched. They're getting their not only their seed money, but their sustainable funding, and then they go off. And what the question is, how do we keep them here?
Well, we need to have affordable space. So, one of the things we do, because we're a nonprofit, is to develop affordable space. And I think having funds to build out more labs, I think would be very helpful to startup companies.
We've seen several new facilities emerge in recent years. As we look at what Nishta said was the next step for these companies, I want to get a sense, and dovetailing with your comment, Eva, how likely are startups to stay in New York City, and what more do they need in order to remain, as opposed to moving to New Jersey or suburban New York or another region of the country like Boston, Cambridge, or Philly?
They're very anxious to stay in New York. Mm-hmm. And they're, once they, get out of the little incubators, they need space where they can begin to manufacture. And that costs money. And I put in a plug that we, if we had investors in building out more space, we could keep a lot more companies here.
Yeah, I'd just like to.
Yeah, sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm
sorry, Diane.
Yeah, Diane.
I'd just like to reinforce what Eva said, because the companies we work with would prefer to stay here. And we actually, a company went to BioLabs in San Diego just because they were offered affordable lab space. And anyway, they are relocating back to New York. So I think, we have a lot to offer to companies, particularly now. And I think we should be able to tackle that problem. And it would be a good, to get a panel of those entrepreneurs together to talk about the decisions that they're faced with. I mean, clearly investment, if the investment comes from New York, they're more likely to stay in New York.
Yeah, we had a fascinating discussion about that on Tuesday, Diane, with a whole panel of companies.
I was on Friday, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Some of our other commenters who wanted to jump in earlier.
So let me just underscore, of course, space is very, very important. But if you look at the world's top 3 ecosystems, as Sam put, they would also likely show up as the top 3 most expensive places to be at. So while space is important, I actually think, it's demand that drives up the cost at these places. So it is the availability of these other factors that reflects the expense, not the other way around. So I would actually also argue that it is important to strengthen the connections between the amazing talent pools that we have here, scientific and investment, and access to complementary assets. The connections are the key. And if you have those, they give you a little bit more of a shield. And in fact, as you increase the cost, if you provide these, it might actually be a good, because then you end up putting a quality threshold where you actually attract the very best who come in for factors that naturally help them grow rather than for space or some of these other SOPs that might be given out.
Yeah, I'd second that as well. I'd say that, you're not going to be able to keep them in New York. Like if they want to go off somewhere else, they're going to go off somewhere else. What's going to keep them in New York is the ecosystem. Okay. If you have all those factors, lab space, investors, great talent coming out of the research institutions, it's that kind of aggregation that you have, that's what draws everybody in. Just anecdotally, I'd also say is, I think it's been picked up before, we're seeing an awful lot of companies within our portfolio. We've got over 700 companies within our global portfolio. We're managing like a billion, just under $1 billion. Like they want to relocate to New York. Okay, so we've got Notco coming in, which is one of our very large companies. So these companies want to come into New York, not just at the very early stage, but at these are kind of, scaling companies. These are companies that have a product and are scaling rapidly. So, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be pessimistic about this. I think there's going to be a lot of companies coming to New York. New York is still a magnet, but it's that aggregation. As Deepak said, like it's not just one thing. So if you focus on one thing, you might miss something. It is kind of like an aggregation of talent, resources that come together that will make this happen.
And then
with my colleagues, it does take a village to do this, as I mentioned earlier. That also means that we need to change the way that we interact with each other. Coming from academia, it's not enough to just launch companies. It's even more important to actually be collaborators with these companies, because part of mentorship and consulting on technology makes them want to stay because the intellectual capital is here, right? So we got to make that shift in relationship between the academic and the corporate.
Great.
And the last thing that I'll say is that, once all of this happens and once you have some successes like New York already is starting to see, nothing succeeds like success. And, then people say, okay, New York is doing this. Maybe that's a good option for me. When we started this, life science wasn't a well-known sector in the New York portfolio. It is now becoming well-known, and once these successes happen more and more, it's going to become a natural choice for people to gravitate towards us as well.
Great.
Perfect.
All righty. So looking up, it's already past a little bit of our time, but it's been pretty good discussion. And I know there's another speaker moving ahead. So I'll move it from here and begin by saying thank you to all the panelists for taking the time this morning and afternoon